Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Mish, and I work at Mavenspire in the marketing department. We're going to be starting our webinar in just a moment. I've got one poll that I'm going to send out to you. If you guys could answer it. That would be great. How are you set up for remote work? All right. Great. We've got a couple votes coming in. Area. We will be saving all questions at the end of the presentation. So once we're there, I can grant you access to ask your question, and we'll do those one at a time. During the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to answer some polls, and you can also chat during the webinar. We want to wish a warm welcome to Julio, who will now start his presentation.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us here at Mavenspire for the Telework series. My name is Julio Corrales. I'm a solutions consultant here at Mavenspire. And I hope you heard good morning. Hi, good morning. My name is Julio Corrales. I'm a solutions consultant here at Mavenspire. Thank you for joining. And we're going to be talking about the current response that most organizations have had to make when finding that their entire workforce now needed to work in a remote capacity. I have numerous years of experience, particularly with helping organizations connect remote employees over secure technologies, particularly because they were regulated industries. They needed to meet a compliance requirement for HIPAA, high tech, or FISMA for federal. So this is the challenge I've been working on for many years, helping organizations kind of meet their governance risk compliance profiles. And there are definite differentiators between the different technologies and different approaches. And that's kind of what I want to discuss today is what are the differences between these two or three really remote work capabilities and what those approaches really mean for the organization. So let's talk about the current situation. We're all been forced to work remotely, 100%. With a few exceptions being able to go into sites for essential functions. A lot of companies decided that if they didn't have a VDI or mature VDI solution in place, that allowing VPN access was the best route to get their remote workers connected. It's the fastest to scale out. It was the easiest to implement and probably the cheaper cost. But really begs the question, was it the right long-term solution? And that answer really is based around what type of organization you already have. So VPN, there's actually two versions of VPN. There's the VPN, our traditional VPN model, and then there's the mobilization VPN. That's a more advanced version of VPN that tries to tightly integrate securities and policies around allowing remote access. And remote access is you're creating a secure tunnel between your endpoint. And in the old model, that was typically an OS-based system. So if that's a Windows machine or a Mac machine, sometimes even Linux machines that you can connect through and create a secure tunnel back to the corporate environment or back to the internal network that you were trying to access. That approach allowed for pretty much once you made that connection, you were trusting that the traffic coming from that connection was intended, that the traffic coming from that connection was secured, and that your users and remote workers would follow policies about storing information on their laptops, or maybe they had to store information on their laptops. One of the differentiators with VPN and mobility is that you're using the compute that you have currently available to you. In this current situation, many people may not have had a provisioned laptop from their work, or they may have had to use whatever was available to them in their home. And that could be an older device, that could have been a device that was used by your kids. It really, everyone was just trying to connect. They weren't really considering, is this the right way to connect? VDI is a different approach in that you're accessing a resource that's running inside of your internal network. So rather than your external resource access an internal, you're accessing a resource, a compute resource that's inside of your data center, inside of your enclave from a security perspective. And applications and the compute are defined in the data center. So those capabilities are there for your users inside of the data center. It's not what you're bringing, it's what you need. So for the long-term decisions, there's a barrier to time to deploy over traditional VPN models. But you gain greater security. IT operations gains greater insight, greater control, and you can even improve the employee experience as well, because you can tailor how their access looks, even make applications rather than simply the compute available. So here are the considerations we're talking about. Deployment time. You know, a lot of people went if they did not have something in place, they went the quick route, and hopefully they had the ability to use a VPN solution that was more advanced. And I'll discuss that in a little bit more when we get into the security. And that was really just a matter of maybe licensing your existing solution and then pushing that out to users, however you manage to deliver that. With VDI, the considerations in terms of time to deploy, well, that takes a little more thought and planning. I use 2 to 4 months here just as a kind of placeholder. It's going to really depend on the complexity of your network and what really you need to do to get to that point. But there are certain approaches that shorten that time, which is the hyper-converged model. Really lets you, with the use of vSAN, lets you really collapse the 3-2-1 of networking, storage, and compute into a more compact model. It's already provisioned for the leading VDI solution, which is VMware provisioned, integrated, and it's an approved solution. VxRail from Dell and VMware work very closely together. So one of the considerations too is you want to choose a vendor that has tight integrations and roadmaps with the VDI solution that you're planning. And the hyperconverged model fits very well within the software-defined data center that everyone's trying to move to for IT modernization and IT transformation. So let's talk about security. So mobilization has a couple of considerations for security. It asks you to do a lot of things ahead of time for your policies and procedures around how your users connect. So if those policies and procedures aren't mature enough, if the underlying tool sets and monitoring isn't mature enough, you really expose the users to vulnerabilities. Now, for organizations that have already had this as part of their ecosystem, they've already had to pass a lot of regulatory compliance audits. They may be in a better standpoint to do this, and especially around mobility solutions, advanced ones that do checks and balances, or rather checks on the connections. So they ensure that the laptop or device that's connecting is able to pass certain check marks on security before it's allowed to connect. again, one of the risks is you're providing direct access to the device to the internal. And in a lot of VPN schemas, because they didn't want to have their users, as you know, when you create the VPN tunnel, you're saying all that traffic is going to your corporate site. And that includes web browsing, that includes accessing websites. So they employ a mechanism of split tunneling, which means that part of the traffic that's intended to go to the internal servers and internal locations, that gets set over the VPN tunnel. The other traffic is not put in that tunnel and goes directly through your existing public connection. What are pitfalls there? Well, if you're allowing split tunneling, you're allowing your users to also have access to websites that could potentially harm them. It's not intentional, but hackers and hacktivists have found lots of ways to try to compromise websites. And users that unfortunately go to those sites are hacked. They have iframes, they have redirects, they have SEO hijacking. There's all these different approaches that can then compromise the system. While it may not necessarily represent a vulnerability to you, that person then has a compromised system and may not be able to pass some of the checks to be able to connect. VDI, on the other hand, is more of a remote control approach. You're not providing remote access as much as you're providing remote control capabilities to your remote workforce to be able to manage a compute resource, or even you're able to extrapolate the application itself and provide that like in a dashboard, check-in, check-out capability to the users. This is important, especially for organizations that have to invite outside resources to help them in their work, be that contractors or developers. You're able to maintain and control their access to your network, and specifically what information they can take outside of the network. And technically, you really don't have to let them take anything outside of the network, because you can provide them compute resources locally that they can access to do their work. Go to the next slide here. So let's talk about how mobility and VDI change the IT operations experience and also the IT operation load. Right now, IT teams are stretched. They're trying to accommodate the requests of an entire remote workforce. It's particularly challenging if you're trying to support end devices that are trying to do mobilization or VPN, because those devices are not directly in their control, and the connection relies on that device's ability to have a working system that will pass the security policies and policing in the case of advanced mobilization, or that's just not bogged down with malware and adware that needs to be addressed offline. So and what a lot of organizations are finding too is when they're trying to enable these VPN, and these are advanced SSL VPN clients, which don't require an installation of an agent or program per se, but you're still doing this bring your own device to work, where that device still needs to be able to provide the compute resources that the person needs to able do their job function. And as I mentioned earlier, that may not be available to them immediately. You may have had to go through supply chains to get and found the delays in trying to get these systems into your users' hands that are approved. There's also the issue of having to individually a many to many for patching and upgrades of security. So VDI to your IT teams represents a kind of a streamlined approach to delivering the remote connectivity. One, it provides zero-touch provisioning, in that really you can do the bring your own device, because you're not relying on that device's compute. You're really granting access to the compute resources that are running in the data center. So the person has essentially they're looking in through a window and sending in clicks of the mouse and clicks of the keyboard. So it's a very efficient way of communicating as well. So a lot of organizations may have found that with their increased VPN usage, the bandwidth that they're consuming has gone up. Their links may be oversaturated. The PC over IP protocols or the secured RDP protocols, or even an HTML5 access, is really a lighter weight protocol that allows you to connect more sessions over some traditional VPN models. One of the greatest advantages to your IT teams is that they're able to do a one-to-many approach for patches and updates or software changes. They can take one image, one machine essentially that they build as the gold standard, and then through the use of cloning and the way that cloning works within VDI models, where you're just tracking the changes within the different clones, you're able to make all those changes on one machine and then push them out and have them recompose, as they say, on the other machines, and then everyone gets the same changes at the same time. It also affords scalability in that you're able to give the user the compute resources they need in a much timelier fashion. So it's really a matter of just building the machine that they would need, hosting it in the data center, and have them connect. It also allows, with the use of RDSH and so forth, for you to be able to connect even physical servers and workloads that through the PC over IP or secured RDP to your virtual desktops, or I'm sorry, to the workforce that's accessing the virtual environment. So that actually lets you connect even to physical servers that are still hosted within your data center. So you're not providing access as much as you're providing control. So what does that translate to for your employees? Well, for mobilization, some of the pitfalls are that if the device doesn't pass the policing and the policies, then that employee may not be able to work during that time. They may have to have that system rebuilt. They may have to have it go to forensics if it's a significantly if there's a significant issue, and they may be starved for the computing resources they actually need. They had the device that was left in their environment is not available to them now, or it's died. It's end of life, end of support in terms of a Windows 7 machine if everyone hasn't completed that modernization. Again, we were all caught having to push these remote workforce solutions in place, probably ahead of some of our time frame to do so. Whereas we had maybe 2080, maybe 4060 in terms of supporting remote connectivity or advanced remote connectivity or mobilization or VDI, we now have had to kind of provision this for 100% of the workforce. And this may be something that we need to support for a long period of time. So it's important to consider the long-term benefits and trade-offs. And there's other thing too with the mobilization is you are limited by the speed of your home network. Now there's some capabilities available now over SD-WAN, where VMware and VeloCloud is a great example. They're providing the branch experience to the home user. This lets them separate out corporate traffic at the home network, and also lets you prioritize traffic. So if you're competing for those Zoom calls with schools or with your kids playing video games and over the gaming networks, you're able to prioritize some of the traffic. You're able to get some much better throughput, 10 by improvements on throughput. So those are also considerations when you're trying to implement some of these heavier demanding or traffic demanding applications. There's ways to offset that with the use of SD-WAN, which is really being pushed out to a model of not just data center and branch, but also the branch as the home office. So VDI allows for customization of the desktop. So the users really get a customized experience. They get a very streamlined experience for the delivery of apps, be that thin apps. So thin apps is supporting an application that may not, that you need to support for a legacy app that runs, let's say, on an older version of Office, but you need to use the newer version of Office for either regulatory compliance, or you just want to use the regular version of Office. You're able to actually put that version of that older version of Office to support that application, or you just make the application itself available on a dashboard that users can check in and check out. Very important, the computing comes from the data center. The workers get the compute that they need, not what they're bringing. And they can also scale that computing power, or the IT teams are able to help provision that computing power much faster than they would trying to deliver that through an OEM model, or trying to upgrade or update some of the existing equipment that they have. So one of the biggest considerations is cost. So cost on mobilization, it's going to be less. You're really just looking at licensing the VPN solutions. I encourage everyone to look at advanced mobility solutions, because they do integrate security much more within their architecture, and help you translate and enforce your corporate policies and security policies into the connections you're granted to the users. It could mean needing to upgrade bandwidth at the data centers to account for all this increased traffic, all this increased overhead. And then there may be a need to push out Windows 10 so that your Windows 7 devices don't become a point of vulnerability to your remote users. Cost for VDI, there's a larger cost. Because it requires you to scale out either your existing VDI environment in order to scale to your current requirements. We're seeing a lot of customers asking us about, or a lot of clients, asking us about how do I, immediately add 100 people, how to, depending on the size of your organization. So there's ways, there's refocus on how the data center can deliver those capabilities, and also how the hyper-converged data center, as we described a little bit earlier, can help you deliver those capabilities. VDI can be delivered in a couple of models. It can be cloud hosted, or it can be on-prem, or a hybrid of the two. And you also have to look at the cost of the VDI solutions that scale. There's licensing from, if you've just been using an OEM model for Windows or another application, you're going to have to look at fully licensing it under an open license program, because you're going to need to have both the virtual and the physical license. You have to look at licensing the VDI solutions too, whether or not it's a named user or concurrent users. And then there's complexity on some of the deployment models, and especially how you're going to support access to either legacy applications or legacy resources. So one of the things, though, that's important to note is that there's an uncaptured cost here. So while you can look at CapEx and OpEx from the previous page, mobilization and VDI have some uncaptured costs. So the real one for mobilization is the time it takes and the delays, and what that means to your productivity to get this implemented at scale. That you're limiting the agility of your workforce because they have to use what they have available to them. Your help desk and IT teams get strained because they're now having to support all these additional devices. So it's a N1 on what they have to support to allow these remote access connections. And then you have to increase your monitoring around the security solution. So this is going to be a challenge for IT teams security teams if you don't really have that continuous monitoring and security in place that you would get from an organization that does SOC as a service, that helps you really understand your security position and understand your vulnerabilities, helps you translate those into actionable items back to your team. We work extensively with Arctic Wolf that provides this capability for teams to be able to get useful information and, more importantly, actionable information so that they get better outcomes. And then there's the lost productivity, again, if you have a blocked worker, because they haven't passed the policy or policing that you've put in place, rightly so, to try to protect the inside corporate information or inside internal information. For VDI, I kind of went over that, this licensing based on OS or OEM, and then the efforts around trying to implement. So mobilization really boils down to, it's great long term if you've really checked the boxes on the other on around security and around access. Your users have the right devices, they have the right compute power available to them, or they really just need to connect certain applications securely. It allows some additional capabilities in terms of MDM to be able to use some of the onboarding and offboarding, but you're still limited within that capability. And it's also important for people that are doing a lot of outflying work. You have to have you really should have the model of the client server environment to do this. You have to have endpoints that are maintained, that are remediated and vulnerabilities checked. And you have to have those RMM tools, MDM tools, MAM tools at your disposal to help support your end users. VDI is right long term if you're trying to streamline your IT operations and trying to increase your employee experience and really trying to provide the compute that your employees are going to need for today and for ongoing. It's great if you have worked a lot with contractors or outside members of your company where you need to ensure that the work that they're doing doesn't impact your security, and you have tighter control over their access and what they can take in and out of the environment. The VDI environment is ideal for those that are looking to do the IT transformation, IT modernization around a hyper-converged data center. It's where you need to have access and computing power provided to your employees. And you want to really truly support that bringing your own device to work, because that device then just becomes a remote control rather than a remote access consideration. Excuse me. So as I'm wrapping up, I'm going to talk quickly about UEM, which is Unified Endpoint Management. There's been a progression here where you're really starting to see a tight integration between delivering delivering endpoint management, MAM, MDM, which is all about increasing the reach of IT to unseen devices. So you can order a laptop direct from Dell. The person connects to a site, and that will then allow these tools, these UEM tools, Workspace ONE is a great example that tightly integrates with VMware and allows you to deliver your policies, your applications to that desktop, lets you harden that desktop or laptop. And this is all without your IT teams having to have any touch, any direct involvement with that laptop. You can see in this situation where we're already experiencing delays in supply chains to get those assets in the hands of our remote workers, those capabilities really enhance your IT team's reach and lets you get your workers back into operation much faster. So one of the things that they found is when they're doing studies, they found that UEM saves about 45 minutes per machine. If you talk about that at scale, that's significant. And you're saving your engineering 20% of their time, giving it back to them to work on initiatives on those strategic projects that they wanted to focus on before all of this happened. And really, it's kind of a game changer to be able to support a never seen device so that a user can, it improves the onboarding experience. And importantly, it also allows for the offboarding experience where I'm going slightly over, apologize. The offboarding experience where you're able to not just remote wipe, but you're able to granularly remove access for particular applications. So if you need to offboard users from access because of licensing requirement or license sealing, there's a lot of different scenarios where you could do that. It helps automate your policies and enforcement to ensure that someone doesn't forget to put something in place. Sorry. So this is where UEM kind of fits within this new remote workforce model and really tightly integrates with Workspace ONE. Now, why am I talking about VMware? VMware has one of the more solid install bases. Many people, I'm curious after this to see how many people are actually using VMware VDI currently or some kind of vSphere technology. But it really fits within an ecosystem. While Microsoft may have introduced Intune, there's not one that's really tightly integrated that tries to tie in the application access, the compute access, and now the MDM and MAM access for delivering to desktops and laptops and so forth. So these are a few of the solutions that are out there around mobilization. These are advanced solutions. The Sonic Walls, the Sophos, and the VDI space, you have VMware Horizon and Citrix. On the UEM, you have Intune and VMware Workspace ONE. So everyone really wants to talk about outcomes. And that's important because a technology is just a technology. If it doesn't solve a problem for you, it's not useful. So let's talk about some of the outcomes around these technologies. Mobilization was the shortest time to implement with caveats. And I'm just reviewing this because we're going to kind of talk about this hybridization in the last piece. You needed to have a lot of things in place, or should have a lot of things in place, to really make that an effective model for remote workforces in terms of being able to apply your security standards and policies that really protects your internal network from the disruptions that, especially now with stretched IT teams and access being an issue, can significantly impair an organization. VDI, if you're not already on a mature path to VDI, or you're looking to expand your existing VDI environment, may take longer to deploy because of some of the considerations around supporting legacy applications. But your workforce gains a lot of abilities. They get the compute that they need. They get customized experiences, and your IT teams are able to do one-to-many approaches to support their computing needs, and also the vulnerability and remediation and patch management that are part of any security posture for any organization, not just if you're regulated or unregulated. And then we're talking about, really, there's a blended approach. This is using a UEM model and a VDI or a UEM model and the mobility to be able to address those gaps that we described earlier. Mobility, the gap is that you're not able to provision the resource that the user is going to need. So it may be possible to push out your policies and procedures, enable onboarding for unseen devices. That means that you can order something direct to your users and they can start using it within that same day. It doesn't go back to your IT teams to set up. It's something that can be set up completely within an automated process. For VDI, it's along the same lines where you're able to send out devices, especially for compliance purposes. Even if you have all these security in place, they look at the endpoint device. Auditors will look at the endpoint device and say, do you have X, Y, and Z installed? So this will allow you to deliver those policies where you do full disk encryption, where you're installing your MDR, you're installing your malware protection, and you're locking down the profiles and policies to just what that user needs to do their job. So if anything, I really appreciate everyone coming today. I'm really sorry I ran a little late. I just wanted to kind of leave a few takeaways here. And I wanted to kind of boil it down into 3 points. So mobilization is really connect what you have. I think it's the situation that a lot of us have found ourselves in when we found ourselves having to support a 100% remote workforce. And that even pertains a bit to VDI because you have to connect what you had existing. You have now the consideration of how do I scale this out if I'm trying to support this on a long term. VDI was connect to what you need. This is give your users the resources that they need today and make it a scalable solution that allows them to access the resources they may need in the future as applications come out with greater requirements for graphics, greater requirements for processing. VDI allows you that scalability and that ease of use and growth. And hybridizing this remote workforce and remote management kind of gives you this blended approach where you're able to provide a secured remote solution as well as being able to extend the touch of your IT department and extend their capabilities by automating many of these workflows around onboarding and offboarding and just getting them connected. So it really matches the connect how you work because you're able to give the people your folks the ability to connect in the way that they're used to connecting within their environment. So Mavenspire, we are solutions experts within this field. We've worked with all these models and all of these technologies. So my ask of you is to say, where am I in this? What decisions have I made in the short term, and what decisions do I want to make for a long-term solution? Within that capacity, Mavenspire and its solutions teams can help you get there, understanding what the software-defined data center looks like, what scaling to support your remote workforce looks like. We also can help with a lot of the, through our partnerships, we have access to helping you understand some of the financing capabilities that are being offered now, Dell and DFS, to help you get to that next level sooner than you may have thought. And so we look forward to being able to take a deeper dive with you if you have questions around these technologies, if you have questions on how to implement them within your environment. And so I really appreciate everyone's time for attending, and I want to open it up to any questions that you may have.
Hey, Julio, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. It looks like we don't have any questions coming in right now, but we've got a few polls.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and share them. So one of them is, Let us know what you're thinking now that you have participated in our mobility and VDI discussion.
Yes, I'm interested to hear. I'm hoping that that you've gained some insight, that this was useful to you, and may have helped you understand your current decisions, and some of the future ones. So,
And once that's available, we can also do, I've got this one where, are you confident that your community is getting the access they need in a secure way? This is a really quick and easy poll.
right. I'm looking for the Uber 5 stars, I hope.
That's right. And then I've got one like, how did we do today?
Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, there's also upcoming series. So if this was one that sparked some interest, we have additional telework series that are coming up that are going to be discussing additional technologies, or rather, and especially the choices around them. I hope that this was, while it wasn't a deep dive into any of the technologies, I hope that you saw that this was kind of about how your choices were shaped for you, and how maybe to take back control of some of those choices.
Yeah, and our next turning to telework, the live webinar is going to be June 3rd, and it's going to be monitoring your data center hardware. And then we've got some other, we'll be having some other downloadable webinars that are coming up, and you'll see them posted on social media, and we'll make everybody aware of them. We really appreciate you guys joining us. And since we're kind of at the end of our time, we just really appreciate your time during this. And please fill out the survey that will get sent to you after this webinar ends. Thanks, Julio, for doing our little presentation on mobility and VDI, making the remote workforce choice.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. I know you're seeing a lot of these, so we appreciate your taking the time to be here.